My stepdaughter yelled, "You're not even my dad," in front of my friend. My wife defended her and told me to have my own child, so I stopped being there, ate me, emptied the college fund, and filed for divorce. I'm 47, male, a plumber. I built the business with my brother Tony. Some people think it's unglamorous work, but the money's actually pretty good. By 28, I'd saved enough to buy a 3-bedroom house in cash. 2 years later, at 30, I started dating Valerie. Met her at some buddy's barbecue. She was 26, recently divorced, dragging around a 5-year-old named Ellie, who hid behind her mom's legs like I was the boogeyman. Valerie seemed different from the usual dating pool disasters. No fake designer, no Instagram obsession, just a woman who wanted someone reliable. Her ex-husband was a textbook piece of work who'd bailed when Ellie was 2 and moved across the country. His idea of child support was maybe remembering to send $200 every few months when guilt struck. Real stand-up guy. Meanwhile, Valerie was working part-time at a daycare, living in some cramped apartment that probably violated several housing codes, driving a Honda with more miles than a space shuttle. The breakthrough with Ellie came about 2 months into dating Valerie. The kid fell off her bike, scraped her knee, and Valerie was stuck at work. Daycare called me because apparently I was the emergency contact now. I dropped everything, picked up this sobbing little girl, cleaned her wounds, and slapped on some cartoon Band-Aids. While I'm playing field medic, she looks up at me with those huge brown eyes and drops a bomb. "Thank you, Daddy." Not my name. Daddy. Turns out she'd been asking Valerie for weeks if I was going to be her new dad. When I asked what she wanted to call me, she thought for exactly 2 seconds before saying, "Dad," like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That hit me right in the chest. I'd never wanted kids. Never saw myself as dad material. But here's this little girl who'd been abandoned by her biological father just handing me that title like a gift. The moment that truly sealed it happened about a month later. I was fixing a leaky faucet in their apartment. The place was a disaster. The landlord wouldn't fix anything. When Ellie came running in from the playground covered in dirt and grinning like she'd discovered buried treasure. Dad, look what I found." She thrust a handful of dandelions at me like they were made of gold, not flowers, weeds, but to her they were the most beautiful thing in the world, and she wanted to share them with me. "These are for you because you fix everything," she said, completely serious. "Mommy said you make everything better." Tony happened to be there helping with the faucet, and I caught him actually getting misty-eyed. Later he told me, "Kids got you figured out better than most adults. You do fix everything. Just make sure they don't break you in the process." Prophetic words, as it turned out. We got married when Ellie was 7. She insisted on being both flower girl and ring bearer because it's my wedding too. During the ceremony, when the pastor asked if anyone objected, she stood up and yelled, "I do," meaning she approved. The whole place lost it. Those early years were magical. Ellie transformed from this shy, uncertain kid into this confident little person who waited by the door for me every day, covered in whatever mess she'd created, bursting with stories about school. "Dad, look what I made," became the soundtrack of my existence. I was all in. Bedtime stories, father-daughter dances, teaching her to throw a baseball without looking like she was having a seizure. This wasn't some obligation I'd inherited. This was my kid, and I was her dad in every way that actually mattered. Blood's just biology. Showing up is what makes you a father. The Saturday morning routine became sacred. Every weekend, just me and Ellie hitting up Home Depot for project supplies, then grabbing breakfast at this greasy diner she loved. She'd order chocolate chip pancakes and tell me elaborate stories about her imaginary friend, while I pretended to understand 7-year-old logic. Those were the moments when everything felt right. I started the college fund when she was 8, every month religiously, plus bonuses from the big commercial jobs. By the time she hit 10, there was already 15,000 sitting there. Valerie's friends would comment on how lucky she was to find a real one who treated Ellie like his own. But here's the thing, I didn't treat her like my own. She was my own. For 8 beautiful years. I thought we had something unbreakable. I should have known better. 13. That's the age when my little used to sprint to the door when I got home turned into someone I barely recognized. It started small. Eye rolls when I asked about homework, that teenage whatever becoming her default response to basically everything I said. But the real kick in the teeth. She stopped calling me Dad. The transition happened gradually, then all at once. It went from, "Dad, can you help me with this?" to just avoiding me entirely. When she absolutely had to acknowledge my existence, it was my first name. Cold, distant, like I was some random dude who happened to live in her house and pay all her bills. The first time she called me by my first name, I thought I'd misheard. We were at Target buying school supplies, and she asked, "Can Isaac get me the expensive notebooks?" Like I wasn't standing right there. Valerie didn't even notice, just nodded and threw the in the cart. I pulled her aside in the parking lot. "Why are you calling me Isaac? I'm your dad." She shrugged. "Whatever. You know what I meant. No correction from Valerie, no apologize to your father. Just another sign that respect wasn't required anymore. Valerie kept insisting it was just a phase. All girls go through this. But this wasn't normal teenage rebellion. This was targeted disrespect. Ellie would be perfectly fine with Valerie laughing and chatting. But the second I walked into a room, she'd get this look like I just tracked dog through the house. Tony noticed it immediately when he came over to help me rewire the kitchen. Your kid just walked past me like I had the plague. Then asked her mom for $20 without even acknowledging you exist. You paying for a teenager or housing a hostile foreign exchange student? The demands escalate right, alongside the disrespect. Suddenly nothing I provided was good enough. The $60 shoes became an insult. She needed the $180 ones. The iPhone I got her for her 14th birthday was the wrong color. Everything had to be name brand expensive, exactly what her friends had, because God forbid Princess looked like she came from a working class household. Ashley's stepdad bought her the new MacBook. Stepdad. That word started showing up more and more, and every time it felt like a slap. This kid who'd called me daddy for 8 years was now referring to me like some stranger who'd married her mom for the health insurance. I started keeping track of the expenses just to maintain my sanity. Monthly phone bill, $80. Car insurance, $150. Dance classes, $120. Designer jeans, $200. Makeup that cost more than my work boots, $150. And that was just 1 month. For someone who treated me like an inconvenience. The breaking point came during sophomore year. I'd spent 12 hours dealing with a commercial backup that was literally covered in it, exhausted and no mood for teenage drama. Ellie's in the kitchen demanding money for some school trip. I need $200 for the senior trip deposit. You're a sophomore. It's an early bird thing. Everyone's doing it. I was too tired to argue with teenage logic. Ask me tomorrow when I can think straight. Cue the eye roll so dramatic I thought she'd detach a retina. Whatever. You never want to pay for anything fun anyway. And that's when something in me snapped. I set down my work bag and looked at this kid I'd been funding for 8 years. Excuse me, I've been paying for your fun for 8 years. Dance classes, summer camps. That ski trip, concert tickets, shopping sprees. What exactly do you think I've been doing with my money? That's different. That's like basic stuff. Basic stuff. 8 years of basic stuff that probably cost me 80 grand, not counting the house food and everything else that kept her lifestyle afloat. You know what? You're right. I'll stick to basic stuff. Food, shelter, utilities. Everything else is extra, and extra costs gratitude. You figure out how much gratitude you want to show me, and I'll figure out how much extra I want to provide. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Probably the first time in her life someone had connected her attitude to consequences. You can't be serious. Dead serious. That night, Valerie tried to smooth things over with promises that Ellie would do better, that things would change, but I could see it in her eyes. She thought I was being unreasonable. She thought asking for basic human decency was asking too much, and the respectful kid was gone. Now I was living with a stranger who happened to share DNA with my wife. And this stranger thought I existed solely to fund her lifestyle while she treated me like garbage. Tony's words kept echoing in my head. Just make sure they don't break you in the process. Too late for that advice, brother. The breaking had already begun. Junior year brought the full transformation of my wife from my partner to Ellie's defense attorney. Every conversation about Ellie's behavior became a negotiation where I was somehow always the unreasonable party. Every boundary I tried to set got overturned the second I left for work. The car situation was my Damascus Road moment. I'd been saving for months to get Ellie something safe and reliable for her 16th birthday. Found a perfect Honda Civic, 3 years old, low miles, great safety ratings. Exactly what a new driver needed. But Princess wanted a BMW because her friend Madison had gotten one. Suddenly my practical choice was embarrassing and would make everyone think we were poor. Madison's stepdad understands that image matters. She informed me during one of our family meetings, which had basically become sessions where Ellie made demands and Valerie found creative ways to justify them. The family meetings were Valerie's bright idea for improving communication. In reality, they were just formalized sessions where I got outvoted 2-1 on every decision involving money. Ellie would present her demands, Valerie would explain why they were reasonable, and I'd be expected to fund whatever nonsense they'd agreed on. I bought the Honda anyway, got 2 weeks of silent treatment and passive-aggressive comments about how her real dad would have understood. Her real dad who hadn't called in 6 months and sent child support about as often as Halley's Comet shows up. The silent treatment was almost peaceful, honestly. No demands, no eye rolls, no being treated like an eight with legs. Tony came over that weekend and immediately noticed the improvement in my stress levels. Kids giving you the cold shoulder. Looks like she's doing you a favor. When I told him about the BMW demands, he shook his head. Kids getting a lesson in reality. Most of us were lucky if our first car had a working radio and tires that matched. But the fight that really opened my eyes happened when Ellie borrowed Valerie's car and came home with the scrape down the side from hitting a pole. When I pointed out the $800 worth of damage, Valerie's response was that accidents happen. Ellie, having overheard, decided to grace us with her wisdom. Maybe if you'd bought me a car with better safety features, this wouldn't have happened. The audacity was breathtaking. She damaged property through careless driving, and somehow this was my fault for not buying her a luxury vehicle. That's interesting logic, I said, keeping my voice level. So if I buy you a Ferrari and you crash it, that's my fault for not getting you a tank. Don't be ridiculous. No, please. Explain to me how your inability to judge distances while parking is my responsibility. That's when Valerie jumped in with her standard defense playbook. She's learning. Everyone has accidents when they're starting out. Everyone pays for their accidents when they're starting out. That's how learning works. But instead of Ellie taking responsibility, they wanted me to pay for the repair without any consequences for the driver. When I suggested she get a part-time job to cover the damage, Valerie acted like I'd suggested indentured servitude. She needs to focus on school. She needs to focus on not hitting stationary objects with moving vehicles. That night, I decided it was time for a come-to-Jesus meeting. I sat them both down and laid it out plain. Ellie, I've been your father for 11 years. I've provided for you, protected you, and loved you like my own blood. But somewhere along the way, you've decided that makes me your personal ATM instead of your dad. The silence that followed was telling. When I asked her when she'd last thanked me for anything, called me dad, or acted like she was happy to see me, she had nothing. I've spent probably $100,000 on you over the years. College fund activities, clothes, food, housing, insurance, medical bills. And your response is to treat me like I'm some inconvenience have to tolerate to get to the money. When I turned to Valerie about enabling this behavior, she hit me with the classic she's a teenager excuse. She's 17 years old. In 1 year, she'll be an adult. And right now, she's completely unprepared for a world that won't hand her everything she wants just because she exists. Valerie's response was that I couldn't make love conditional. But I wasn't making love conditional. I was making financial support conditional, because right now, I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the two people I'd been supporting were treating me exactly like one. I drew a line in the sand that day. Ellie would start contributing to the household with chores, respect, and basic human decency. Valerie would back me up instead of undermining every boundary I set, or I'd find somewhere else to live where I was actually wanted. The ultimatum bought me exactly 3 days of improved behavior before things went back to normal. They thought I was bluffing. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Senior year brought tension you could cut with a knife. The dinner party incident was the final nail in the coffin. I was hosting some friends, Mike and his wife Sarah, a couple other guys from the trade, plus Tony. Nothing fancy, just grilling burgers and having drinks on a Saturday night. Standard weekend stuff when you're an adult with actual friends. I'd been looking forward to this for weeks. Work had been brutal. Back-to-back commercial jobs, long hours, difficult clients. Having people over felt like getting back to normal life instead of constantly walking on eggshells in my own house. We're sitting around talking shop when Mike mentions how expensive college is getting. I made some offhand comment about at least having money saved for Ellie's education, assuming she didn't want to go somewhere ridiculous like NYU. Sarah laughed. Smart parent. We started saving when Emma was born, and it's still not enough. The key is starting early and being realistic about expectations. I said, not knowing I was about to get a masterclass in unrealistic expectations. That's when Princess decided to make her grand entrance. Phone permanently attached to her hand like a life support device. Actually, I've been accepted to NYU, and I'm going. Mom and I already talked about it. News to me. The table went quiet because even my friends could tell this was about to get ugly. Mike shifted uncomfortably. NYU's a great school, expensive, but great. Congratulations. We'll need to discuss the finances for that. The fund covers state school. She looked at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat. You're seriously going to ruin my future over money. I'm not ruining anything. I'm being realistic about what we can afford. Tony, who'd been nursing his drink and watching this unfold, caught my eye and gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. He could see where this was heading. And that's when she decided to put on a show for our guests. Started ranting about how I'd never treated her like she belonged, how I acted like every dollar I spent was some huge favor, how I should be grateful she wasn't letting us live in poverty. Grateful Mike's wife looked confused. Shouldn't it be the other way around? But Ellie was just getting warmed up. He's always complaining about money, always making me feel guilty for needing things. Like, sorry I cost money to raise. Maybe you shouldn't have married someone with a kid if you couldn't handle it. This kid who'd been living rent-free in my house for years, whose every need had been met by my paycheck, was lecturing me about gratitude while I was hosting a dinner party. You should go to your room, I said, my voice deadly calm. Don't tell me what to do. You're not my father. You're just some guy my mom married who thinks money makes him important. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of being her dad, and that's what I was to her. Some guy her mom married. Tony's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Ahem. Anyone wants another drink? I looked at Valerie, waiting for her to say something. Anything. A correction. A reprimand. Hell, even an embarrassed apology to our guests. Instead, she stood up and put her arm around Ellie. She's upset about college stress. Maybe we should call it a night, not apologize to the man who raised you. Not that was completely inappropriate. Just an excuse and a suggestion that our guests leave so her precious daughter wouldn't face consequences for publicly humiliating me in my own home. Mike stood up slowly, clearly uncomfortable. Yeah, we should probably head out. Thanks for dinner. Sarah gave me a sympathetic look as they gathered their things. The burgers were great. We'll talk soon. Tony lingered. Actually, I think I'll stay and help clean up. After my friends left looking appropriately mortified, I came back to find mother and daughter in the kitchen, whispering like conspirators planning the next phase of their campaign. Well, I said mine to explain what had just happened in front of my guests. Valerie's response was that Ellie was upset and college was stressful. When I pointed out that the college she was supposedly attending cost $60,000 a year and the fund only had $85,000 in it, they suggested taking out loans. We could take out loans, meaning I could take out loans since Princess wasn't exactly loan qualified. That's when Valerie showed her true colors. Maybe if you actually treated her like your daughter instead of some charity case, she'd act like it. Charity case. I'd treated this kid better than her own biological father ever had, and my wife's response was to defend her when she called me some guy you married. You're right, I told them both. I'm just some guy you married because a real father would get respect in his own home. A real father wouldn't have his wife making excuses when his kid publicly humiliates him. Well, if you wanted to control someone, maybe you should have your own kid. Valerie shot back. What followed was complete silence, but the damage was done. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. You're right, I simply said, ending the argument. Tony, who'd been quietly cleaning dishes in the background, finally spoke up. You know what's fascinating? I've been here for 3 hours, and not once did I see either of them thank you for the house, the food, the lifestyle, or the 11 years of playing dad. But they sure as knew where to stick the knife when they wanted to hurt you. Oh, and that NYU acceptance complete, I checked. She'd been lying about that too, just like she lied about everything else when she wanted something. That night I slept in my office, but I didn't sleep much. I spent most of it planning my exit because if I was just some guy Valerie married, then some guy Valerie married could just as easily become some guy Valerie used to be married to. The nuclear option wasn't just on the table anymore. It was loaded and ready to launch. Monday morning, I did 3 things that changed everything forever. Moved all my business income to a separate account, called my lawyer, and liquidated Ellie's college fund. All $85,000 of it. Gone. Vanished. Poof. I didn't tell them right away. Let them think everything was normal while I got my ducks in a row. Took about a week to get the paperwork ready and my assets protected. Tony was the only one I told about the plan. His response, about damn time. I was starting to think they'd sucked out your spine along with your bank account. The lawyer was this woman named Janet, who'd handled enough divorce cases to spot the signs immediately. Let me guess, you've been funding everyone's lifestyle while being treated like garbage. When I explained the situation, she nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times. Classic case. You're the provider, not the partner. Good news is you kept everything in your name. Bad news is you're about to find out how nasty people get when their meal ticket disappears. The first sign something was wrong came when Ellie's car insurance got canceled. She found out the hard way when she got pulled over for speeding, and the cop informed her she was driving uninsured. What the hell happened to my insurance, she demanded when she got home. I stopped paying for it. You can't do that. I need my car. Then get a job and pay for it yourself. Valerie came running from the kitchen, ready to negotiate on behalf of her client. When I explained that I don't pay for things for people who disrespect me, she tried the she needs her car for school argument. She needs a lot of things. It's a lot. Respect being the main one. Ellie attempted the apologetic approach next, crocodile tears saying she was sorry and didn't mean it. Just stressed about college, you know. Didn't mean those things about me not being her dad. Actually, I think you meant every word. And that's fine, but you can't have it both ways. Either I'm your dad who deserves respect, or I'm just some guy your mom married who doesn't owe you anything. You already picked. The tears dried up real quick when she realized the apology wasn't working. The real meltdown came when they discovered the college fund was empty. I was in the garage working on my truck when I heard the screaming from inside. Ellie had tried to check the balance online and found a big fat zero where $85,000 used to be. She burst into the garage like a banshee. What did you do? I liquidated the account. You can't do that. That's my money. Actually, it was my money. Every deposit came from my business account. The account was in my name. Legally, it was always mine. Full-blown panic attack. The realization that her free ride to college had just evaporated hit her like a freight train. But I was going to use that for school. No. You were going to use it to party at an expensive college you're not even qualified for. Different thing. When Valerie joined the chaos and started screaming about how I was destroying Ellie's future, I handed her the divorce papers I'd been carrying in my back pocket. The silence was beautiful. Valerie stared at those papers like they were written in ancient hieroglyphics. Are you serious? You're divorcing me over this? Yes, I am. You've made it clear that you'll always defend your daughter even when she's wrong. I'm doing us both a favor. She's my child. How could you? And I was your husband, never her father. You both made that clear. Ellie was still having her breakdown about the money, now adding threats about fighting this in court. Good luck with that, sweetheart. Every deposit was documented. Every penny came from my business. And the account was always in my name as custodian. The reality started sinking in fast. They'd gone from comfortable middle-class life to struggling single mother and daughter in the span of 10 minutes. When Valerie asked what they were supposed to do, how they'd survive, I gave her the honest answer. Same way millions of other single mothers do it. You'll figure it out. They tried everything after that. Promises of changed behavior, threats of legal action, guilt trips about abandoning family. None of it worked because none of it was sincere. The papers were served the next day. 11 years of marriage and 13 years of playing dad to an ungrateful kid were officially over. They had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The eviction countdown had begun, and I was finally done being the guy everyone took for granted. The first few months after they moved out were weird. I'd come home to complete silence. No teenage drama, no demands for money, no walking on eggshells around anyone's feelings. Just pure, blessed peace. It took time to adjust. 13 years of constant chaos doesn't just disappear overnight. I'd catch myself listening for footsteps upstairs, or waiting for someone to ask me for something. But slowly, I started remembering what it felt like to actually live in my own space instead of just paying for it. The house felt bigger somehow. Turned Ellie's old room into a proper home office. Got rid of furniture that reminded me of them. Basically reclaimed every inch of the place. New paint, new carpet, new everything. It was like exorcising ghosts. Business was better than ever. Amazing how much wealth you can build when you're not bleeding money on other people's expensive tastes and imaginary college funds. The stress of constantly arguing about money just disappeared. You know what the best part about this whole situation is? Tony said one day while we were installing a new water heater. You finally remembered you have balls. I was starting to think they'd moved in with your backbone. About 2 months in, I got a text from Sandra, one of Valerie's old friends. The quiet one who always seemed to be observing more than participating in their social circle. Hey, I heard about the divorce. Just wanted to say I'm sorry you went through that. You don't deserve it, really. I almost didn't respond. The last thing I needed was getting dragged into Valerie's drama through her friends. But something about the message seemed genuine, so I thanked her. I know we don't really know each other, but if you ever want to grab coffee and talk to someone who's not involved in the situation, let me know. We met for coffee the next week. Nothing romantic, just two adults having a normal conversation. She asked how I was holding up, seemed genuinely interested in my answers, didn't pry for gossip or try to get me to talk about my ex. I watched that whole situation for years, she said eventually. You tried so hard to make it work. They just couldn't see what they had. First time since the divorce that someone acknowledged what I'd actually been dealing with. Not taking sides, not making excuses, just seeing the reality of the situation. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into movies, and eventually we were spending serious time together. But we took it slow. I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, and she understood that completely. I'm not going anywhere, she said when I explained my hesitation about relationships. Take all the time you need to figure out what you want. Through Sandra, I heard bits and pieces about how Valerie and Ellie were adjusting to reality. They'd moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town, splitting $200 rent and arguing about grocery money. Valerie was working full-time now. Ellie was working part-time at Target while trying to figure out community college. The adjustment was apparently brutal. They'd gone from a comfortable house with all bills paid to the harsh reality of actual budgeting. Turns out when you're not living off someone else's generosity, money gets tight real quick. Valerie keeps asking if I think you'll change your mind about the college fund, Sandra told me one night. She seems to think this is all some elaborate lesson and you'll eventually give them the money back. Not happening. That ship has sailed, hit an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. About 6 months in, Sandra mentioned that Ellie had tried reaching out to her biological father for college money. Guy had apparently laughed and hung up on her. The best part, I was genuinely happy. Not just relieved to be out of a bad situation, but actually happy. Sandra was everything Valerie wasn't. Supportive, appreciative, settled. She had her own job, her own place, her own money. Revolutionary concept. When she finally moved in with me almost a year later, it was because we wanted to build something together. Not because she needed somewhere to live. She contributed to expenses, helped with home improvements, treated my space like ours instead of hers to redecorate. And the respect. She valued my opinion, supported my decisions, actually seemed to enjoy having me around. We got engaged 2 years after the divorce was final. Simple proposal. Nothing dramatic. Just two adults who'd found something real and wanted to make it official. Tony liked her, and he was happy for me. But the real surprise came when Sandra told me she was pregnant. I'd never thought about having biological kids. After Ellie, I figured my parenting days were behind me. But holding that ultrasound picture, seeing my actual child for the first time, something deep in my chest just opened up. This kid would be mine from day one. No competing loyalties, no reminders about real fathers, no years of building a relationship only to have it thrown in my face. Just pure, uncomplicated love. We got married 6 months before our son was born. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Life was good. Really good. And I'd almost forgotten about my old problems entirely until they decided to remind me they still existed. 5 years after the divorce. I was living the dream. Married to Sandra, father to our 3-year-old son, Jake, business thriving house, completely renovated and feeling like home for the first time in years. I'd built something real, something that belonged to me. Then my doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. Sandra was giving Jake a bath upstairs, and I was enjoying my coffee like a civilized human being when I opened the door to find 2 women I barely recognized. Valerie looked like she'd aged 15 years instead of 5. Stress lines, gray hair, she wasn't bothering to hide clothes that screamed paycheck to paycheck. Ellie was with her, and the transformation was even more dramatic. Gone was the entitled princess who used to demand designer everything. "We need to talk," Valerie said. "No, we don't," I replied, starting to close the door. "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let them in. They sat on the couch. Sandra and I had picked out together, looking around at the renovated space like they were visiting a museum of their former life. "The place looks incredible. Really nice renovations. What do you want?" They exchanged glances, clearly having rehearsed this conversation. Ellie's finally ready for college. She's been working and saving for 3 years now, really getting her life together. She just needs some help with tuition for the state school. I almost laughed. Almost. "And you thought I'd be interested in that because you raised her, because she's learned from her mistakes, because you loved her once." I loved a kid who called me dad and appreciated what I did for her. That kid doesn't exist anymore. She never did. Ellie finally spoke up with what was obviously a prepared speech about how terrible she'd been. How she'd said horrible things and treated me like garbage, but how she'd grown up and understood now how much I'd sacrificed. "I know I can't take back what I said that night about you not being my father. I was angry and stupid and I hurt you. But I've had 5 years to think about what I lost when I lost you." The words sounded rehearsed, but there was something in her voice that suggested actual regret. The problem was too little too late. "Good for you. What's that have to do with me?" Then came the real reason for the visit. Valerie had lost her job last month. They were 3 months behind on rent. Eviction was imminent. Her biological father wouldn't help, of course. That sounds like a you problem. That's when I heard small footsteps on the stairs. Jake came running into the living room, freshly bathed and in his pajamas, launching himself at me with the kind of pure joy that still knocked me over every time. "Daddy," I scooped him up, and he immediately started babbling about the toy truck he'd been playing with upstairs. This kid who saw me as the center of his universe, who trusted me completely, who would never question whether he belonged in my life. "That's your son," Valerie said. "Yes, he is." Sandra appeared at the top of the stairs, and when she saw who was in our living room, her expression shifted to something between surprise and anger. The tension ratcheted up immediately. Sandra moved to stand beside me, putting her hand on Jake's back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "They were just leaving," I said. "Actually, we weren't done talking." "Yeah, you were," Sandra said firmly. "This is our home, our family time. Whatever you want from my husband, the answer is no." I'd never heard Sandra use that tone before. Pure steel wrapped in politeness, the same voice she probably used with difficult clients who thought they could walk all over her. Your husband Valerie's mask slipped completely. I was married to him for 11 years. I built a partnership with him. You built a dictatorship where he paid for everything and got nothing in return. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I watched you take him for granted for years. I watched your daughter treat him like garbage while he kept trying to earn love from people who never intended to give it. When Ellie tried to defend how things used to be, Sandra cut her off. "When's the last time you called him dad? When's the last time you acted grateful for anything he did?" Silence. Beautiful telling silence. Valerie was getting desperate now, talking about family and history and how I couldn't just throw that away. "Watch me," I said, echoing the words I'd used 5 years earlier. But then she crossed a line. "You have a son now. Don't you want him to learn about forgiveness, about helping family?" That's when I really lost it. "Don't you ever use my son to manipulate me. He's going to learn that respect is earned, not owed. And he's sure as hell going to learn that you don't reward people who treat you like." Sandra stepped forward. "You need to leave. Now." My phone buzzed with a text from Tony, who was apparently driving by. "Saw some beat-up Honda in your driveway. Either you've downgraded your taste in cars or your past is haunting you. Need backup or an alibi." As they walked to their beat-up car, the same Honda I'd bought Ellie for her 16th birthday, now held together with duct tape and hope. I could hear Valerie talking angrily to Ellie about that and how I'd changed. I hadn't changed. I'd just finally learned my worth. I texted Tony back. "Past equals exercised. Alibis unnecessary. Thanks for having my 6, his response. "Good. Now get back to your real family and stop letting ghosts ruin your Sunday." That night after Jake was asleep, Sandra and I sat on our back deck with a drink. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay. Got reminded why I made all the right choices. She leaned against me. Your son is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have both of you. Looking at what I'd built, a wife who respected me, a son who adored me, a business that was thriving, a home that actually felt like home. I couldn't imagine going back to that old life. Some people come into your life to drain you. Others come to fulfill you. I'd finally learned the difference. And I was never going back.